Good evening and welcome to our presentation. This presentation was put together by Makisha, Valen, Gabrielle, Rachel, and Victoria. The study we chose to replicate was using goal setting and feedback to increase weekly running distance. During this presentation, we will discuss the purpose of the study, the literature review, the methods and results, limitations and conclusion, and of course, our references. The purpose of the study was to determine whether the use of goal setting and feedback were effective ways to increase running distance. We chose this study because we all agreed that running and being more active were two things we wanted to improve. And individually, we were able to challenge ourselves and strengthen our health by setting goals for ourselves. As a group, we were able to motivate and critique each other by providing feedback.
Got it. I got it.
And this is the start of our literature review. First article we reviewed was by Sabo and Abraham on the psychological benefits of recreational running. It consisted of 50 different recreational runners whom were each given a survey before and after each run. This survey was called the Exercise-Induced Feeling Inventory, and it was based off a 4-point rating scale. 4 positively engaged and 1 was physically exhausted. The study concluded that all participating runners had a positive change in their affect due to running and the release of endorphins and serotonin that comes along with. That second article we're looking at, we reviewed, was by Brobst and Ward, and this study focused on a high school game and the effects of goal setting. For this study, a multiple baseline across behaviors was used, the effects of public posting, goal setting, and oral feedback, and all 3 of those were used to target skills. The study concluded that all 3 components were effective measures in increasing of those targeted skills, but there was no generalization that was made from practice to games. The article we reviewed was on the activity trackers in young adults through the lens of the social cognitive theory. Activity trackers were worn by a group of young adults, and this group consisted of both professional runners as well as recreators. And the activity tracker was used to track progress in terms of pace, distance, and duration. The study also focused on the use of activity trackers for overall health purposes. The study was based on the social cognitive theory, and criteria included awareness of potential health risks and benefits, as well as overall health. At the conclusion of this study, all 57 adults who participated documented feeling better and healthier, and the majority of participants also agreed that they felt more confident in being able to complete personal health and staying physically active in the future. And then on this next slide, we have a continuation of our review where we have 2 other studies. So the first one up there we reviewed was a study by Mayer, Ambrosi, and Edney. And this study focused on the overall experience that 237 different individuals had with wearing an activity tracker, and this was set over a period of a few weeks. At the end of the study, most participants felt that they integrated more physical activity into their day because of wearing that activity tracker. And 68.3% of those were current users who were already using the activity tracker, that the activity tracker acted as a self-awareness. And that last study that we reviewed by Dentman on the effects of various training programs regarding running improvement. This study consisted of 145 different individuals who were each assigned to one of 5 different training groups. Participant was tested for running speed before the study started, and they were also tested again for the running speed of the study. And this study took place over an 8-week period. The study concluded that individuals increased their overall running speed due to the implementation of those training programs.
Our Our study consisted of males ranging from the age of 23 to 42 years old, and the states vary: Louisiana, Texas, Nebraska, and Tennessee. Each participant agreed outside or on a treadmill. We also used Apple watches, and one of the participants wore a Gear Fit 2. We each downloaded the definition of a running episode is defined as running or steady pace of 4 miles per hour or faster on a treadmill or on a example of running would be running a 5K run. A non-example, from a car to secure your location to avoid a weather emergency, such as prior to starting the study, each participant filled out a physical readiness questionnaire, any medical issues that may have affected their participation. Each participant tracked the number of man app. We also added the date, duration, number of miles ran and sheet. All participants were able to meet once a week via video chat, performance, and to also provide positive feedback to one another. During this time, was always set for the following week. We implemented a multiple baseline participants with an embedded changing criterion designed for intervention 2.
So throughout our study, all observation periods were 7 days. Each period started on a Saturday and concluded on the following Friday. During, participants were directed to maintain their typical level of activity, but to track each run by starting prior to running and stopping the app when they finish. The data for each run was examined by the participant. If the run was met the 4 mile an hour criteria, then the distance was in a shared document for data collection. At the end of the observation period, the graph the cumulative run distance for each individual. Baseline data was collected for a minimum of or until stability in the data was observed. When a stable and predictable trend was observed in a participant, they would begin intervention 1. Prior to the initiation of intervention 1, an initial held with the participant in which she would set a long-term goal and a short-term goal. The long-term consisted of a distance in miles that the participant would like to be able to run per week. But at the completion of the study, the data was reviewed to determine whether each participant met. The short-term goal in intervention 1 stated the distance the participant would run per run episode during a minimum of 3 runs per week. Intervention 1 used the same procedures as were used in baseline to collect and compile run data. At the end of each period in intervention 1, there would be a feedback meeting in which graphical and verbal feedback given. The graph contained the individual's run data for the current week and the weeks prior. The verbal feedback consisted of a summary of the trend and level of data compared to the weeks prior. After feedback was given, the participant would set a goal for the next week. If she had attained her goal run distance goal for a minimum of 2 runs during the observation period, then the participant would be required to increase her goal for the next week. If the goal was not met, then the participant was to remain at the same goal or decrease her goal for the following week. Data for intervention did for 2 to 5 weeks or until intervention 2 was put into place. Due to participants not meeting the criteria set weekly in our original study, they developed and implemented intervention 2 with a portion of the part. Due to time constraints, our study only had one individual participate in intervention. During intervention 2, the participant no longer set goals based on the distance of individual run. Minimum number of runs were per week was waived. The short-term goal in intervention consisted of the total cumulative distance the participant would like to run throughout the week in miles. Run distance was tracked and collected using the same procedures. The distance for each week was still compiled and graphed, but the graph included a changing criterion component that marked the goal the participant had set. At the weekly feedback meeting, the same graphical and verbal feedback was given and for the next week. In order to increase their goal, the participant was required to meet her cumulative distance criteria for 2 weeks, consecutively or non-consecutively, with the most recent point at or above criterion level. If the participant did not meet her goal, then she was required to the same goal for the next week. Data was collected on intervention 2 for 4 weeks.
For IOA, the individual runs met the behavioral definition of 15 minutes or fast counted towards the total. The Nike app, however, showed tremendous variability with the maximum pace 27 seconds and a minimum pace of 4 minutes and 23 seconds. There's not enough time left in the study to flush out the problem either with the app or the app. Therefore, the researchers accepted the data as collected by the app as the collector of the IOA data, considering the data as 100% IOA with the course professor. However, the treatment of the data is as described.
Okay, overall, our showed a significant increase in 2 of the 5 participants. Rachel was the one who had taken part in both intervention 1 and intervention 2. Her long-term goal with the study was 3 miles a week, and she was able to reach and exceed this goal by the end of the study. It was 3.1 miles per week. Intervention showed a very modest increase in distance of 3.2 miles a week. She was able to meet her goal 60 of opportunities in intervention 1. The data collected in intervention 1 was stable. It only ranged from 3.0 to 3.3 of 3 weeks, which provided us enough data to start intervention 2. During intervention, was able to meet her weekly run distance goals of 75% of opportunity. Her mean distance per week in intervention 2 was 3.1 miles baseline mean. The next participant was Valen. And she was one of the 2 participants who had shown a large increase when intervention was implemented. Valen spent 4 weeks in baseline with a mean distance of
2.4 week and a range of 2.0 to 2.7. Her long-term goal was 4.5. Valen met and exceeded her long-term goal. During intervention 1, the mean increased to 6.1 miles. The data showed a steep increase with a low ability throughout the intervention phase. Valen was able to meet her weekly goals for 83% spent in intervention 1.
Victoria's baseline mean was 4 point baseline range 2.8 to 6.6. Intervention 1 mean 9.1 range 3.4 to 11.8. Victoria was able to meet 100% goals. Victoria was also able to meet and exceed long-term goals of 3 miles per mean was 1.7 miles per week, baseline range 0 to 3.2, mean 1 mile per week, intervention 1 range 1 to 1. To meet 50% of her daily distance goals, Gabrielle was able to meet long-term goals week. Makisha's 2.3 miles per week, baseline range 2.1 to 2.4, mean 2.3, intervention 1 range 2.1 to 2.5, able to meet her 100% of daily distance goals. And she also was able to go of 1 mile per week.
During baseline intervention 1, fidelity was measured within conditions by the procedural integrity checklist. Participant needed to complete the following steps: wear a sport band, no goal set the same way until placed into intervention. The data collection process for this included the Run Club app and discussing the results at the weekly meeting. Members completed the steps of the procedural fidelity checklist indicating yes, all procedural integrity results were collected as a result from the screenshots of the running log and integrity chart. During intervention 1, the participants to meet as a group no more than 20 minutes and receive visual and verbal feedback. The distance goal initially after baseline. For each, they indicated yes or no to meeting their goal and wearing the sport band. And discussed the results, and if they set a new goal or stayed with intervention 2. The participants were required to meet as a group and receive visual and verbal feedback as well. There was only one participant in intervention 2. She just discussed it with the other participants. No to meeting her goal and wearing a sport band and staying at the same goal or setting a new goal. We showed 100% for Victoria, Makisha, Valen, and Rachel due to the effects of the coronavirus for a week to care for her grandmother.
Okay. The limitations. COVID-19 was something that had an impact on every participant. COVID-19 is a virus that had spread throughout the world by the fourth week of our study. The virus caused gym closures, which prevented some of us from using the treadmill. The virus also caused child care facilities to close, which limited the parents to only running at certain times of the day. The virus also called for a shelter-in-place order, which limited the ability to go to parks and other places with outdoor tracks and trails. Also, in the middle of our study, it began to get dark outside between 4:30 and 5 p.m., just depending on our location because of daylight savings. And most of us get off around that time, so it was dark and it was kind of hard and unsafe to run at that time. Running outdoors was another major limitation for us because the weather was always unpredictable. So some days it was raining or it was really windy. And it also was difficult to track the pace of running outdoors versus running on the treadmill, because on the treadmill, we can set the pace to what we want it to be. But physically running outside, we would have to constantly look to see if we were staying at the required pace of 4 miles per hour.
At the conclusion of our study, we found that intervention 1 was very effective for both Ballin and Ballin increased her average running distance by 3.7 miles, and Victoria increased her average 0.7 miles. This was not the case for Gabrielle, Rachel, or Makisha, though, who remained responding from baseline. Rachel was the only participant to enter into intervention 2 increase. It was not a significant enough change from baseline levels. In conclusion, the data does not support the hypothesis of a functional relation between goal setting, feedback, in an instance. And this last slide is, and these are the references we used throughout our study, particularly with the. Thank you for watching our presentation, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking through my questions. The feedback by your treatment fidelity checklist, it looked like everybody.
Yes.
Okay. When you were setting the goals, so how did you participants set those, or did you set those as a group, or did the researchers set them? Individual. Okay, so that you set your own goals. Okay. Why do you think you didn't have the outcome that they had? What was different for you? I know there's some limitation, Gabrielle. I hope your grandmother is well now. But what else do you think happened?
For me, mine was in the form that we filled out. I do have, but at the time that I was running, I sometimes would have flare-ups to where I wasn't able to walk as long.
Okay. Okay, that's a good check. We'll talk about that too. But go ahead. Who else has? Do you have any other thoughts?
I think being outside to be more of a factor than I originally thought. I felt very well, and then different environmental factors like running uphill compared to staying in wind kind of took effect for me, and I found that my stamina just wasn't as strong outside.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I
The
also,
setting was different.
I also think the environment that the research was conducted versus the environment that we replicated is in different states, which means everyone's experiencing something absolutely different outside elevation or running in grass versus the sidewalk. So I think it was more controlled with the.
Do you think there was anything to, like some of the studies that you were using in your lit review? We, when we use goal setting to increase a behavior, it's a behavior we want to increase. Did you all want,
Yes.
and it just didn't happen, or you did? You all agreed that? Okay.
I think that our activity level, I think that a lot of the studies in our lit addressed athletes though, who they dedicate goals, whereas we kind of had this general like, oh, run more, but we aren't. It's not necessarily something that really, really, want to go outside and act.
No, that's a great point, right? There's something that was motivating them beyond just that, the run or the behind it. Yeah, that's really good thought. Okay. Did you find that the treatment fidelity checklist helped? Like, what could have been added that there was some variability around? One thing I'm thinking about is that after you looked, I think one of the first checklists, that after you Nike Run Club app and determined that the run met criteria, then you would upload it on the Excel. But because we were talking about this, I know that some of those runs were really variable. So that those would have gotten the check for no, because you shouldn't have uploaded those if they didn't meet the criteria.
No.
Okay. So then how did you manage that? You have researchers. If you felt like one of the steps wasn't followed, did you just eliminate that or go ahead and keep it?
We went ahead and kept it because it was too do anything about it.
Okay.
I think
I was just thinking like in real time, if you met every week, then at that point,
yes, it
some of it come up.
We would have kept it then.
Just went ahead and saw it. So like I saw a couple of them. Like one was 36 minutes or whatever it was. So that right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and you can stop recording if you want.